Welcome to The Beat. I'm Ari Melber. I also want to say good to be back with everyone. I want to give a special thanks to Melissa Murray and Antonia Hilton, who sat in, if you happen to catch any MSNBC in the last week or week and a half. They held down the fort on this program to great effect, working with our team and our guests and experts and journalists. So thanks to them. I'm back with you. And as I was saying to Nicole, happy to be back. Plenty going on. We begin with Trump slipping into what has become the unlikely political quicksand. As you know, you follow the news, there have been many controversies and policy problems and failures in these first 150 plus days of the Trump administration. But the political problem that clearly is the largest for him on the center right, the right, and now engulfing really his entire DOJ is the Jeffrey Epstein scandal. Today, there are new reports Trump is, quote, fuming at the uproar taking down him, his agenda, his presidency at this point. And while there are many different ways to cut up this scandal, what you can see very clearly is that this one has virtually no typical defenders of the president. One podcaster says it is Trump's biggest bipartisan scandal this year, meaning that the outrage runs from the MAGA right to the center right, where there's sometimes critiques of Trump, to Republicans who were never with Trump to begin with, to the center left, to the far left, to legal experts. The press has been all over the story, from the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, New York Times, all across TV. Demands for information coming from elected Democrats and Republicans and MAGA leaders. And now the disturbing comments from Trump. Today, while he's in Scotland, he was faced with these Epstein questions. When you are the president, the job goes with you. And even a master of PR distraction like Donald Trump has found he cannot get away from this story, even if there are credible accusations that he and people in his administration are abusing power, cooking up fake stories and fake investigations just to try to get anyone talking about something else. It's clearly not working. It's not working tonight on this broadcast, for example, because we always try to just follow the big stories and facts, not the bouncing ball distractions. But quite frankly, it's not working in general. And when you deal with someone tied to this sex trafficking scandal, the person who has faced the largest legal accountability, Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's co-conspirator, it would be baseline obvious for any responsible leader in any party to say that justice is served and she will serve out her term in prison. But Donald Trump, for whatever reason, is now unable to do that. You may have noticed this story came up last week. It's come up again tonight with these questions where, after interviewing her at the Trump DOJ and after all of this scrutiny, Donald Trump won't rule out a potential pardon or commutation for her. And Epstein victims warn that she is a convicted perjurer. Trump won't rule out the pardon. I want to show the totality of what he said, as mentioned recently, and then again today.
Would you consider a pardon or a commutation for Ghislaine Maxwell if she's cooperating?
It's something I haven't thought about. It's really something.
Recommended it.
It's something I'm allowed to do it, but it's something I have not
You're
thought
not, but
about.
you-
Mr. President, I didn't completely rule out a pardon for Ghislaine Maxwell when you landed. Is that something you would ever consider
Pardon for who?
for Ghislaine Maxwell?
Well, I'm allowed to give her a pardon, but nobody's approached me with it. Nobody's asked me about it. It's in the news about that aspect of it, but right now it would be inappropriate to talk about it.
That's a lot of words. I'm going to show you what the attorney says in a moment. But first, let me just say something about what we heard from the president. That's a lot of words without just saying convicted people in this Epstein saga, whether you call them perjurers or sex traffickers or co-conspirators, but people convicted for these horrific crimes, which so many people say or claim to care about, people convicted will not get out early, will not get leniency. If you've ever followed pardon stories, it is usually people who have been wrongly convicted or convicted and overcharged, so they serve many years for something small, say something nonviolent. That's typically what you cover in law and journalism about pardon stories. But it's usually very easy for a politician or a president to rule out pardons for people rightfully convicted of the most heinous crimes. He wouldn't do it last week, as I showed you. He wouldn't do it today. That is itself suspicious. That's full stop. Now here, let me show you that quote we were putting up here, because I want you to see this. Also news. Her attorney, who's still trying to appeal this case to the high court, says we're appealing to the president himself to recognize how profoundly unjust it is to scapegoat Maxwell for Epstein's crimes. And the DOJ official who interviewed her is not just some person following up on the case. Indeed, they also recently fired the prosecutor who successfully won this case. If you care about the victims, if you care about the actual underlying sex crimes, right, you've had people who've worked diligently on this case for years in the background, not on TV, not in the conspiracy theories online. They ousted that prosecutor, Ms. Comey, but they sent in Donald Trump's former criminal defense attorney, who's considered very loyal to him, who now is a top DOJ official, Deputy AG Todd Blanche. And they gave her limited immunity to talk, even though they've already done all this. Remember, the DOJ has already completed this whole case. If there was any reason to give her immunity for special information or info on other people, they already did that when they had the pressure of her case. Democrat Dick Durbin wants the tapes and transcripts of what are these unusually out of process, sort of suspiciously timed, new Trump DOJ interviews with her. And Trump clearly did not rule out a commutation or potential pardon. I'm allowed to do that is very different than saying, of course, I won't do that. You could ask a president, take Trump out of it. Hey, are you planning to nuke Canada tomorrow? And they would say, no, why would you even ask? Or, no, I can rule that out. You could also say, well, legally, the Constitution gives the president the authority to bomb other countries. That's true, but a very strange way to respond to something that up until very recently, nobody was talking about, which is entering the Epstein case to help out an Epstein co-conspirator. That's where this has landed now today. The President of the United States suspiciously refusing to rule out helping Jeffrey Epstein's most guilty, convicted, infamous helper. MAGA's in a frenzy. And the DOJ has contradicted itself already over the years. There are many related Trump DOJ scandals that have built us up to this point. Take someone who is very close to Donald Trump, who scored a critical 2.5-hour interview with him in the October closing of the campaign, someone who has tens of millions of followers. Again, if you want to put it in TV terms, Joe Rogan has the audience of several TV channels combined. And this is what he's saying to his audience.
The whole thing was nuts. And then he's like, well, we have a film. We're going to release that film. And the film has a minute missing from it.
Yeah.
Like, do you think we're babies? Like,
Plus,
what is this?
The mob wants to eat, right? And they've been throwing red meat to the mob about Epstein files now for years. And now the mob is oddly bipartisan because it's got the Dems and it's got, part of the base of Trump in there.
We thought Trump was going to come in and a lot of things were going to be resolved.
Yeah.
We're going to drain the swamp. We're going to figure everything out. And when you have this one hardcore line in the sand that everybody had been talking about forever, and then they're trying to gaslight you on that.
Rogan upset about Trump lies or, quote, gaslighting. And this is why Trump is fuming and frustrated with the handling of the Fuhrer by his own team, exasperation following weeks of missteps. No clear strategy among top officials who underestimated the outrage the Post reports, and especially the president's base, hoping the country would, quote, forget about the unreleased Epstein files and move on, end quote, has not proven an effective strategy. And so you take this all together, it is very different from many of the other substantive problems that Trump has faced. Government involves politics. We all know that. The politics on this one have exploded in Trump's face. The vows and pledges and promises to get to the bottom of this were from Trump and his allies, even though some of them, maybe some were uninformed, but some of them had to clearly know that all the key touch points of this lead back to the Trump administration. Now, as a journalist, I'm not saying what we don't know or can't confirm about some of the most sordid accusations swirling around the Epstein case. But when it comes to the suspicious in-custody death, it was in the custody of the Trump DOJ. When it comes to the secrecy around the case, the lack of releases, that was also the Trump administration, term 1 and now term 2. When it comes to the case promise that the key, quote, client list or other details would be released, Trump said it on the campaign trail, Pam Bondi reiterated it. Then they broke that vow. Then they issued a memo that was of Nixonian Watergate cover-up proportions saying there would be no more disclosures. And that couldn't hold for very long because now Trump himself is undercutting that memo from his Justice Department saying maybe they should disclose grand jury material. If you want to drain the swamp, but you are the swamp, how do you do that? We're joined by Mark Leibovich, staff writer for The Atlantic and an MSNBC contributor, the author of Thank You for Your Servitude, Donald Trump's Washington, The Price of Submission, and Michelle Goldberg, who has been reporting on this sordid scandal and its many tentacles at the New York Times, also an MSNBC analyst. Michelle, you have argued that there are a lot of psychological motivations, sort of political intrigue that has led the sort of MAGA base to at one point think this story would, quote, help them or lead them somewhere they wanted to go. But they're so publicly invested in it that now they've been walked down a road they don't want to all go down. But unlike other loyal MAGA stories where people have dropped it, they're not dropping it this time. I'm curious what you think about where we are tonight with this story clearly following the president overseas.
Well, I think that you have to go back to QAnon from Donald Trump's first term and this conspiracy theory fantasy that evolved around Trump, the idea that Trump was, although he might seem like a kind of depraved and immoral character, he was secretly this warrior for light that was battling this unspeakably evil cabal of elite pedophiles. And I've always seen that as a way of sort of rationalizing support for Trump, who on his face kind of contravenes the values of anyone who's ever claimed to be a Christian conservative. But nevertheless, this mythology around him has become very, very strong. And it's intersected with the Epstein case because here you do have an elite pedophile who has been protected kind of manifestly. We don't know in all the ways, but there's been all sorts of manifest injustices, and he has a lot of relationships with very powerful figures that can't be explained in normal terms. And so there are all these legitimate questions. And I think people who had built up this image of Trump that was never based in reality, but the idea that Joe Rogan said that he was going to drain the swamp, that he was going to come in here and all these things were going to come to light. People had kind of invested in him. The idea that he was going to be reelected and there was going to be some sort of great national catharsis in which the enemies of that world were kind of finally revealed as the villains they were and dragged out and finally punished. And, right when people thought that this great drama was going to culminate, Trump said, oh, never mind.
Right. Mark?
I mean, I think the larger point here maybe is, I mean, the Epstein case is a story. It has relatable individual. Donald Trump is in the middle of it, but it's also a part of a larger sort of theme of Donald Trump not actually delivering on what he says he's going to deliver on. I mean, this whole promises made, promises kept trope that has has been a slogan of his really for both campaigns, all three campaigns, never really held water. I mean, to some degree, Epstein is a much more relatable vision of him not, turning around inflation on week one, not ending the Ukraine war on day one, or Middle East on day one, balancing the budget. I mean, everything he has said he is going to do, both presidencies, both terms, he has not done. This actually, I think, has worn out a lot of his supporters over time. And Epstein has become such a palpable and identifiable story. You have someone like Joe Rogan, who's not just someone speaking for a lot of listeners, but he's someone who is voicing pretty, emphatically and pretty clearly and concisely what the breach is and what the sort of lie here is, which is I think, very relatable to a lot of his supporters.
Right, and there's a way that Trump, more so than traditional politicians, has been able to dismiss and diffuse so many things by saying, "Oh, they're Trump haters. Everyone's out to get Trump," and it's a version of the OJ defense. It's like you're either this bad or everyone's out to frame you, and they all had secret sonar plans and communications, and wow, they really got you. Every time you pull on a thread, you say, "Well, no, that person must have been in on it too." Rogan is uniquely invulnerable to that. He doesn't come from Republican or MAGA politics. He's a huge public supporter of the president. He will have a lot of audience either way, regardless, for the future. I mean, he's demonstrated that. And so when he says they lied to us, it somehow hits different than other people who've credibly said they lied to us about issues you mentioned, Ukraine or prices. J.D. Vance has been on full defense. And I mentioned that, Rogan, again, we're quoting him a lot tonight, but some of what he said is true. Rogan mentions in that same podcast that this is a bipartisan scandal for Trump. Rare, perhaps, that Americans are celebrating anything bipartisan, but there it is. And J.D. Vance has not just been playing defense on the right. He's been talking to journalists. He's been reaching out where he can. He went on the attack against the Wall Street Journal over this so-called bawdy, illicit birthday card that Trump reportedly sent to Epstein. Trump denies that and has been suing the Journal over it, we should note. Vice President Vance discussing this online. He was on Twitter, now X, saying it's all BS. Chris Hayes, we want to show, then used that sort of space, which can still be a space for conversation or dialogue, to press the vice president about it. And they had a back and forth. And I want to play some of Hayes' reporting or coverage of that exchange.
The contention is that the book is entirely fake, or Trump being a contributor is fake, or all that is real, but someone created a totally fake Trump letter and then stuck it in the real book. Now, to his credit, the VP, who sort of holds open office hours over there on X, decided to engage with my questions with a lengthy response. Quote, the contention, which is pretty clear if you just read what I said, is that it's bogus for the Wall Street Journal to publish a hit piece without showing us the letter. I have no idea if the book exists. Wall Street Journal won't show it to us. I have no idea if the letter exists. Wall Street Journal won't show it to us. I have to say, on at least one point, I agree with the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance. As I said, quote, in point of fact, the contention isn't about journalistic process, and the lawsuit certainly isn't. Trump called the letter fake and sued for defamation. Like you, I'd love to see the book produced, which I think is what you're calling for. We're in agreement.
Hayes doing what diplomats do sometimes, Michelle, finding the sliver of perhaps agreement. But what do you think of that piece of this? And both, I'm curious on the substance, what you think of what Vance and others allege about the Journal reporting, which seems to have hit a nerve and a big lawsuit because it alleges an ongoing, I want to speak very precisely, an ongoing socialization or fraternization between these individuals with references to personal or romantic liaisons, not going any further than that, but that's the sort of cartoonish version of their discourse, substance, and then politics, that J.D. Vance feels the need to address a lot of this to a lot of people right now.
Well, and that J.D. Vance, to me, the headline is J.D. Vance says, I have no idea if the letter exists. Because Donald Trump says the letter doesn't exist, or at least that he didn't write it. He's suing the Wall Street Journal over it. If even his own vice president isn't sure that Donald Trump can be trusted in this instance, what should the rest of us take from that? And also, does it mean that Donald Trump is suing a major American newspaper if, in fact, the letter does exist? He's suing a major American newspaper to shut down a potentially true story. That's also a big scandal. And so I think in some ways it shows the untenable position that J.D. Vance is being put in trying to defend this, because Donald keeps saying things that are just demonstrably untrue. I mean, not in this instance, I also haven't seen the letter. And so although the New York Times has reported that Donald Trump contributed to this book, the letter hasn't been public, but Donald Trump has said a number of things in this case, in this scandal, that are demonstrably false. J.D. Vance needs to defend him. At the same time, he needs to keep the MAGA base that is following every twist and turn of this story on side. And in doing so, he made what I think is an extraordinarily damning admission about his faith in the man that he's serving.
Mark?
Yeah, I mean, this is what J.D. Vance signed up for. And by the way, I mean, to Michelle's point, I mean, this is not just a major American newspaper. And this is the Wall Street Journal, which is, owned by arguably Donald Trump's most important, media ally out there, and Rupert Murdoch. And it's not just the Journal, by the way. It's Elon Musk. It's, it's Joe Rogan, as we talked about. So, yeah, I mean, and also you do see, I mean, they're going the process route, right? I mean, J.D. Vance says, I haven't seen the letter. I have no idea. And by the way, he sounds very authoritative when he's saying it, even though he's not. He's not being decisive at all. But, Chris Hayes is very deft, and he said, okay, well, let's show it here. And then J.D. Vance would sort of just throw his hands up. I mean, that's usually where really the only defenses come from here. And at best, it runs in circles for them. But what it's certainly doing is not shutting this down. And it seems like it's going to dog the president and the administration for a while.
Right. And there's so many checks they can't cash. And now they've uncorked processes, including the legal process of seeking grand jury material release that brings in other parties and further limits their ability to, as MAGA supporter Joe Rogan puts it, gaslight the nation. Mark and Michelle, a lot of wisdom here on a tangled story. Thank you both. Good to see you. Appreciate you. I want to tell folks that coming up, we turn to the more explicit war on the free press, the censorship sought after by Trump's FCC and his administration. Special guest on that. First, though, the intervention, they're calling it. Pete Hegseth's allies trying to help him help himself before he's taken out, and nearly $1 billion that were funneled for that Qatari plane and why that is also being hidden by the Trump administration. We're back in 90 seconds.
There's chaos in the Department of Defense.
Are you going to step it up? You're going after Hegseth?
A lot of my colleagues are realizing his limitations, and I think the White House, as I said, is also realizing his limitations.
Key remarks from a top Democrat on military oversight there, Defense Secretary Hegseth on shaky ground. It's 6 months into the job. New reports on him clashing with generals over allegations that he's using politics to decide promotions. That is, of course, completely off the books, not how the military is supposed to run. The Post reporting he was actually rebuked by the White House for this fairly unusual and very controversial attempt to use unreliable lie detector or polygraph tests on other officials. Politico reporting that Hegseth allies in and out of the Pentagon have engaged in something of a, quote, intervention, concerned the laundry list of scandals could actually lead to his downfall. And just to put a fine point on that, you're hearing about people who actually want Hegseth to succeed, saying even they think it's so bad, they have to step in. And what you see on your screen is this campaign-style video about him making it to 6 months. Remember, this is also unusual because most people who run the Pentagon at the level of the civilian oversight, and of course the generals, do not do a lot of direct self-promotion, let alone campaign-style internet videos. If they're promoting anything, sometimes you will see them go out of their way to promote the troops and honor their service, not themselves or reaching the arbitrary 6-month mark. It has noticeably not a recent clip of Trump's praise, but reaching back to April.
Number one, I have so much confidence in him. They don't know how tough he is, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth.
6 months in, on Hegseth's watch, the Pentagon has been accused of hiding the cost of that Qatari gift of the big plane, sneaking it into an unrelated budget on nuclear modernization. And the Times has found that hiding job isn't working very well. They say this could run $1 billion. All of this adds to why we might have the unusual spectacle of a Pentagon chief celebrating 6 months. Now, we have a lot in tonight's show. I told you I'm happy to be back with you after a little time off, and I've been catching up myself, including how John Oliver has been busting Trump with receipts on the failed efforts to distract from Epstein.
Yeah, it's that easy. And if they keep asking, just say, Hillary shot JFK, Rosie O'Donnell did 9/11, and Nancy Pelosi f***ed a bat. That's how we got COVID. No further questions.
And what's going on with the FCC and this controversial merger? We have an FCC commissioner on tonight concerned about these corporate, quote, capitulations to Trump. But right now, we're going to turn to the new whistleblower stepping forward. You may remember that big story about the insider at DOJ who actually heard the Trump officials say they'll just defy the courts. They'll say, quote, F you. One of the questions was, okay, did anyone else hear this? The answer is yes. New corroboration for the bombshell account. We have that new story next. There are whistleblowers, and they keep blowing the whistle. The whistles are getting louder because we're hearing from more people corroborating these accounts of the absolute madness inside Trump's DOJ. Concerns over Emil Bovee, the former Trump attorney and top official who's up for a prestigious lifetime tenure judge position. We have new corroboration of what you might remember as that FU report, the complaint from a former senior DOJ attorney saying he heard Bovee tell attorneys that one plot or plan would be to defy court orders, to tell the courts FU and grind on. Basically, we'll tell them FU and do what we want on immigration. This isn't a case, we should note, that they ultimately lost at the Supreme Court. There are two other whistleblowers who've made basically related claims. They're unnamed former DOJ attorneys, one providing evidence to the Judiciary Committee, the Democratic staff side. The other submitted a complaint in May, filed with the Inspector General. Whistleblower's lawyer saying they had evidence that senior DOJ officials must have violated, have violated, quote, laws, rules, or regulations. All of this comes as Trump has talked up flouting court orders.
I believe there was a court order there that upheld, which has now been, I think, correctly repudiated by virtually everyone, a court order that upheld the internment of Japanese civilians in internment camps during
as bad as it was, that court order was followed for years, was it not?
And I just wonder whether some historians might think we'd be better off if it hadn't been followed.
A Trump DOJ official saying he wonders whether other people, historians, think they should defy the courts, and using the rather odd example of abuse of federal powers, in that case internment. Of course, Trump officials are defending other types of federal powers, including National Guard and Marines on the streets. So the example doesn't even really work for them, but it speaks to the idea of breaking court orders. Supreme Court has sided with Trump a lot. The Wall Street Journal reports, though, some lower court judges are exploring how to legally constrain this runaway agenda within the Supreme Court's rulings. I'm joined now by Ankush Kordori, who brings a special expertise here as a former federal prosecutor, the type of person who would be in some of those rooms like those other whistleblowers, also now covers all this for Politico. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start with the corroboration. When you have former government officials speak out, there's a whistleblower process actually supposed to give them extra protection. People remember from the Ukraine impeachment and other issues where this has come up. But we can't just always take one person's account as definitive. What does it say to you that this original account from Mr. Ruveni, which talked about the FU and all that, seems to be getting extra support? Well, as we've noted, Mr. Bovee gave a kind of a broad denial. I want to read what he said. He said, I have no recollection of saying anything of that kind. I've said things encouraging litigators to fight hard for valid positions. But your view on whether this is corroboration?
It does seem to be corroboration, as I actually I'm not sure I would characterize that even as a denial, right? I mean, I don't recall. It's not exactly denial. I mean, that's what he told Schiff when he was, Senator Adam Schiff, when he was asked about this at his confirmation hearing. This meeting was not that long ago. The alleged meeting was in mid-March. So the idea that if this occurred, you somehow forgot about it, or you want to maintain some wiggle room is already kind of suspect, if you ask me.
Let's pause on that point. So as a lawyer, you're saying that if you had a client who said, I definitely never said, we'll tell the courts FU, they know they didn't say that, then how would you advise them to fully and honestly answer a question? Did you say that?
No, I didn't say that, right? Unequivocally deny it. He can't do that. He couldn't do it. And one possibility, among others, is that he was concerned that there may be corroboration that emerged. And there was corroboration even before this. Erez Ruveni, the first whistleblower who came forward, produced documents and semi-contemporary text messages that really did corroborate and buttress his account. And so, what we've seen now is like we have these other people coming forward. I've seen in the press today that, Republicans, Senate Judiciary Chairman Chuck Grassley has said, well, these people are coming forward. It's a Democratic sort of hit, media coordinated strike, whatever. I interpret this in almost the exact opposite direction. What it says to me that you have multiple people coming forward is that people are worried and dismayed about the prospect of Bovee being on the bench. And there's no real upside in these people coming forward in this way, right? It's not like they're going to get any sort of
not
fame
right
or anything
now.
like that. No, in Ruveni, he's been trashed by Republicans and I think unfairly criticized by Grassley himself. So I'm not that surprised that the subsequent whistleblowers are maintaining their anonymity. Mr. Ruveni was not treated well by Republicans and the chairman. So I think what we're seeing
I'll
reflects
just jump
some
in. I'll let you finish, but I want to underscore what you're saying in this environment. And we have a lot of informed viewers who know you've got multi-millionaire, top-level corporate CEOs with tons of power, lawyers, and money. And they're on the run trying to appease Trump just to make money or do things, as we've seen in the allegations of the merger coming down next week, et cetera. So for a random public servant who's been on a government salary for the past few years to take on the administration this way, no, I see it as mostly downside for them. And you're saying legally that tells us what about their likely veracity?
That they're probably telling the truth, right? All things equal, that they're probably telling the truth because there's no incentive for them to lie or to shade this in any way. I mean, I did my own reporting around Mr. Ruveni after the Bovee confirmation hearing when he was sort of dumped upon. I spoke to a bunch of his former colleagues, and they all, to a person, really described him as credible and nonpartisan. Now, I have my disagreements with how frankly, adamant Mr. Ruveni was up until this point in actually defending the Trump administration. You would not have caught me in a courtroom defending the Kilmar Abrego Garcia situation in any capacity, but
he evidently thought that it was within the purview of his job and tried to do it to the best of his ability. I have not come across any reason to suggest that he is contrived these allegations, he's shading them, or he's lying in any respect. And the fact that multiple people have now come forward suggests to me that people are very concerned, and that they are particularly very concerned about the needless rush to move this confirmation forward. This is a seat on the Third Circuit. It is not some national emergency for that seat to remain vacant while these allegations are investigated. And yet what you see from Republicans is, I think, a real desire to move this forward as quickly as possible, perhaps because it's very important to Trump himself.
Right, and that Donald Trump often tried, but sometimes failed last term, particularly on the big, potentially illegal matters, to get everyone to go along. That's why he ended up with a legal team of Giuliani and co., rather than more top people. And so he may be very clear about wanting to say it's a new day and you'll get all the rewards, judgeships. You won't end up prosecuted in Georgia or wherever. He has a very shrewd handle on the incentive structure, and he's trying to bend it. And yet, as you just mentioned, there's a lot of people at DOJ, including people who defended Trump policies, travel ban, et cetera, who say if the line becomes overthrowing the court rule of law of this country, then we don't have democracy, and that's too far. So I appreciate both your analysis and your reporting, Ankush. Thank you. I'll tell folks we will turn to the wisdom of John Oliver by the end of the hour, roasting Trump on Epstein. But first, the very important issues around free speech. We have an FCC insider. Perfect guest for this next. The big media merger is almost here. Free speech experts speaking out. The parent company of CBS, which is 60 Minutes and Colbert, has this merger, Paramount Skydance, closing $8 billion next week. Trump's FCC now okaying the merger after all of this lead up with controversies and direct statements by some around Trump that they saw this as a deal where they would support it if they got what they wanted. Critics say that's the problem with censorship front and center.
This could be corruption. I fear the end of CBS as I knew it.
It's really an ominous situation for the First Amendment.
What their consideration is using that information ecosystem to get power and also revenge.
The appearance of this wink-wink deal basically lets every other company and every other billionaire know that Trump is open for business.
Honest, unbiased, fact-based journalism is being tainted.
We have a lot of experts and veterans there saying that this is a corporate power play, a deal with the government to change what would otherwise be the free press. Reports are that Skydance also promised the FCC they would end diversity initiatives and have a new hire go into the complaints about CBS, all of that before it was green-lit. This happened after Paramount paid $16 million directly towards Trump because of this basically loser of a lawsuit complaining about CBS interviewing Kamala Harris.
Now, I believe that this kind of complicated financial settlement with a sitting government official has a technical name in legal circles. It's big fat bribe.
Colbert, speaking truth to power, he certainly knew that was a risk. His show has since been canceled, although we can report CBS's parent company says it was a financial decision in the works. People are debating that as well, while Trump's FCC chief warns of more consequences.
I think President Trump is fundamentally reshaping the media landscape. We're going to continue to see consequences over the coming, months and years as this industry sees a pretty big, reshuffle take place.
A business reshuffle is how media works when it's owned by businesses. If that's all that means, fine. But President Trump, the government, reshaping the free press is antithetical to the amendment the founders thought was so important. They put it first, that a free press is not controlled either through levers or directly by the government. So what's really going on at the FCC? Our next guest is a commissioner there, Anna Gomez, who's also criticized the leadership of that agency over this very story. She joins us next.
The appearance of this wink-wink deal basically lets every other company and every other billionaire know that Trump is open for business.
Senator Warren criticizing the approach there, including what's happening at the FCC. And we're now joined by an insider. Anna Gomez is a commissioner at the FCC and a Democratic appointee. Welcome.
Thank you.
When you look at the process and now approval of this merger of the CBS parent company, was this done in a traditional and proper way or not?
What you're seeing here is the weaponization of the FCC as part of this administration's campaign of censorship and control. It exerted pressure on the company in order to gain ideological and financial concessions and favored coverage.
So the FCC is not supposed to do that? I mean, not everyone follows it that closely, right? So there's plenty of politics in Congress. If we heard a similar pressure, you'd say, well, they press Congress and see where they can go. But in your time at the FCC, have you ever seen a deal go down like this?
This is absolutely unprecedented. First of all, the First Amendment and the Communications Act prohibits the FCC from censoring broadcasters. And in this case, what you saw was New Paramount agreeing to self-censor based on content that this administration doesn't like. And that is a direct violation of our First Amendment.
Yeah. And so the Trump commissioner in charge, Carr, has been very blunt about this, more so than most. I should mention, as full disclosure, FCC is involved in overseeing aspects of companies, media companies we're involved with as well, but that's not going to affect, our independence or coverage here. Do you view his approach as partisan, as trying to abuse the FCC's regulatory oversight just to get political or MAGA goals?
I think that this administration will use any lever of power that it has to force corporations to bend to its will. And what's particularly worrisome, of course, is that we want a free and independent press because it is important to have checked power, not unchecked power in this country. It's particularly important for our democracy.
Yeah, and Chairman Carr, who I mentioned, not exactly a household name, I don't think, but here's some of what he was saying to our sister company, actually, CNBC.
Did you want to see the Colbert Report go away in order to approve this deal? Was that part of the decision?
Well, it's clear to me that Colbert doesn't have it anymore.
Is The View now in the crosshairs of this administration?
Look, it's entirely possible that there's issues over there. Frankly, I think the media industry across this country needs a course correction.
He doesn't want to apparently admit the exact deal if there was one, but is it the FCC's job to course correct from the government what the press does? It seems antithetical to that job. And that question, plus a final one for you, is what, if anything, can be done about this? You may be objecting, but you're in the minority. What else do you think should be done?
Well, as you said, I am in the minority, but my power is in my ability to dissent. Here's the truth. Capitulation breeds capitulation, but courage breeds courage. We have seen plenty of organizations and corporations push back against this administration's attempt to censor and control. And we need more people to do that. We need people to stand up and push back because we don't want this to become the status quo.
Yeah. Understood. And as I told viewers, you're an insider. You're dealing with this through the process that's not always front page news. And yet from 60 Minutes to Colbert, we're seeing a lot of people, as you mentioned, speak up. You're saying that is heard in the halls of power, which is interesting. Commissioner Gomez, thanks for joining us. We're going to fit in a break. And when we come back, we will hear from John Oliver on the Epstein saga. John Oliver is back on his HBO show after a little summer break, and he went right at Donald Trump's failed bid to distract from his own Epstein crisis.
He basically spent this week desperately trying to draw people's attention anywhere else. He threatened the Washington Commander Stadium deal unless they revert to their old name, posted an inexplicable 3-minute highlight reel of old internet clips like a woman grabbing a snake with her bare hands and various jet ski tricks, and accused Obama of treason for trying to steal the 2016 election. Yeah, it's that easy. And if they keep asking, you just say, Hillary shot JFK, Rosie O'Donnell did 9/11, and Nancy Pelosi the bat. That's how we got COVID. No further questions.
John Oliver knows how to mix it up and speed it up, the fast joke delivery about the obvious way some of this stuff wears thin. He also went after this deposition.
Have you ever socialized with Donald Trump in the presence of females under the age of 18?
Though I'd like to answer that question, at least today, I'm going to have to assert my 5th, 6th, and 14th Amendment rights, sir.
Yeah, not great. If the answer's no, just say that. Instead, Epstein started listing amendments like he was ordering off the value menu.
John Oliver with the punchlines, arguing if it looks bad, maybe that's because it's bad. Now, I can tell you where I was on my time off. You can always connect with me on social media at arimelber.com. That's myname.com, or on socials, and I will be sharing where I went. The hint is it's usually cold, but it was warm. All right, that's at my website. We'll talk about that later. That does it for The Beat.